Hi, welcome. I'm Eduardo Bunge from Parente AI. This is the third video that we're recording on AI and mental health. Let's talk about it. And today, finally, we're going to get into the field of AI conversational agents, which is the thing that I would say I like the most, right? So conversational agents are also known as chatbots, for those of you that have been living completely unconnected to the world. Chatbots have been popular and they started in 1966 with Eliza. So it's not something necessarily new, but a few things happened in the last years that made this like explode and become very popular. So let's give a little bit of context. You can have chatbots or conversational agents that are based in text, others that are based on voice, right? You probably have these devices at your home. The speaker, I don't want to mention it because it's behind me, but you are starting to get used and exposed to having conversations with machines. So those conversations can be by text or by voice. And in the field of mental health, there's a nice analogy by Angie Joring. She said that chatbots or conversational agents could be considered an intermediate between in-person therapy and self-help, right? The therapist is not there, but can also help the client. Now, not all conversational agents have been created equal. So there are some things that we need to keep in mind when we try to understand the impact of these beasts, right? So first of all, there are many advantages of why we need to use them. There's first shortage of mental health providers, or maybe it's not that there's not enough of us, it's that we're not efficient enough, right? There are barriers to care that people don't want to go to mental health providers because there's stigma, because it's costly, because they don't have time. So these conversational agents will overcome those barriers. May have another problems, to be fair, but may overcome some of those barriers. And they can be scalable. They are going to be constantly available. They are interactive. And some people, because they are sharing things in an anonymous way, they are very open to disclose whatever they are going through. That sometimes that doesn't happen with humans. So I was saying that not all conversational agents have been created equal. There are two big differences, two different types. One are the rule-based chatbots is one of those, and the other one is large language models that are using generative AI. So I will talk a little bit about these two big types and how these things can influence what we do in mental health. So probably you're very familiarized with these chatbots in customer service that will ask you, hey, Eduardo, how are you doing? If you say good, then it will tell you, great, that you're feeling good. If you're saying something like, I'm feeling bad, it's, oh, I'm sorry about that. With these chatbots, you need to script every single interaction that may happen with the user. This is highly time consumer and it has some pros and cons. On the one side, if you need to do something very specific and the conversational agent address that need, you may get a quick response in an inexpensive way and solve the problem very easily. But what usually happens is that humans, we don't respond very well to these kind of routes. We want to explain something more complex, or we want to ask something that is outside the scope of what that chatbot has been scripted. And there is where those chatbots kind of have some problems. The nice things of the rule-based chatbots is that they are very safe, right? Because you control absolutely everything that the chatbot will say. So if a client tells a rule-based chatbot, tell me how should I kill someone, the rule-based chatbot will probably never say that because the developers never explain how to kill someone in those chatbots. Never, hopefully. So there are some very important limitations of these conversational agents, right? Sometimes they do not address the user's needs very well. They are safe. That's an advantage, and you can control whatever they say. Most of the research that we have seen until 2023, 2024, I would dare to say, has been done in chatbots for mental health using rule-based. I've done 9 studies, I think I published. All of those were mostly with rule-based chatbots. And we're working now on integrating the other type of chatbots, that's the generative AI or large language models, chatbots using large language models, right? So let's go to those ones. So probably if you heard about ChatGPT, if you haven't heard about ChatGPT, I'm wondering how are you here, right? But this has become more popular than YouTube, Facebook, whatever you can imagine, and more and faster than TikTok, right? It reached 1 million users in like a day, right? So it's become very popular because people can actually talk about whatever they want with these generative AI chatbots. So, and that's a very big difference with rule-based chatbots. So let's say a little bit about the 4 big models that we have here are OpenAI, ChatGPT, Claude by Anthropic, Bard, and Llama by Meta. Those are kind of usually the 4 big large language models that we have. Why are we saying that this is generative AI? It's basically because they have been trained with whatever you have in the web, right? And they generate new responses based on that information that has been used to train them, right? And so because they generate responses based on what they have been trained, we cannot predict 100% what they're going to say. We cannot control 100% what they're going to say. So this is a big difference between the rule-based chatbots that we were talking a minute ago. So we cannot control what they're going to say. We don't know if they're going to give accurate information or if they're going to say something that could be harmful for a client, right? And there have been some examples of generative AI chatbots saying things that were harmful, right? To be honest, those type of things also happen with humans, right? But let's talk about that in a later video. Now, let's see a little bit how these bots work so that we understand what we can do in the field of mental health. This is from State et al. 2023. This is a paper on how to use large language models in psychology. And this image shows a little bit what you can do with the large language models. So most of them have been trained with large data sets. In some cases, they learn without any example. So I can go to one large language models and tell them, deliver cognitive behavioral therapy for someone that has depression. And it can go ahead and start doing it, right? There are going to be probably tons of problems with that part, but without having any example, they will learn. Another thing that you can do if you're thinking of using generative AI to design chatbots for mental health is to give them some examples. And that's what's called few-shot learning. So you say, hey, here, I have an example of how a cognitive behavioral therapy model works with someone that is depressed. Or here's an example of how you can provide parent training for someone that has a child with behavioral problems. So with just a few examples, the system can learn and adjust to the particular user. Again, you may have some limitations on those type of things. So usually what you do when you have these 2 options is you do a lot of prompt engineering. You start fine-tuning the prompts to be sure that the chatbot adjusts. So for example, don't give a response that is 1 page long. Try to give responses in a sort of a text message. Try to keep in mind that this is a communication via text. Try to be Socratic rather than prescribing the whole treatment in just one message. So those are things that you have to constantly adjust to make the system work better. Now, there are other things that you can do. For example, the other thing is fine-tuning a specific model. So you can give lots of conversations. So for example, parent training, that's one thing that we're working on parent AI, right? And tell the program here, have all these conversations of how parent training it is. And when someone comes and talks about, hey, I need help with my child, it will give you responses based on all what has been trained there. So, or for example, we can actually say, here you have a parent that is very resistant, and here you have examples of how to handle resistant parents, right? So you give many of these examples and the system will learn and then will produce specific responses to that particular client. And there's another way of doing this that's called reinforcement learning with human feedback. And this here you get more in the field of machine learning. I have plenty of friends here in the Bay Area. They all talk about this all day long. And basically what you have is you train the model, you have some labeling of what is good, what is bad, and the system starts learning what is good, what is bad, and start adjusting its algorithm to keep improving in time. And here they use something that's called explore exploit. So sometimes it will try new things to see if they can improve, and sometimes it will use the things that it knows that already works well, right? And with that dynamic feedback that's getting from the users, it keeps on adjusting, and that's why it's called machine learning, because the machine is the one learning. It's not the human that's telling them this is what you need to do, right? So these are some ways in which we can work in developing mental health chatbots. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not just one prompt and that's it. There's a lot of things that need to be done. So another thing that could be interesting for those working in this field is to use a knowledge base, or RAG, retrieval augmented generation, in which basically you populate the system with lots of documents of things that say, hey, I want you to only talk about what's contained here. So for example, at Parent AI, we've been uploading tons of documents, right, that are good documents about empirically supported interventions, or about scientifically funded knowledge on how to do parenting, right? So if someone asks anything to the bot, it will talk about all the content that we have selected. So instead of providing a response on all what's been in the web and what the developers of that company, let's say OpenAI, Google, Meta, have been training the model, it will talk about the things that we professionals, mental health professionals, have selected. This will give you a little bit more confidence on the type of material that will be provided. And the other thing that you can do is to set guardrails. Never talk about X, Y, or Z. If you're doing a chatbot for psychotherapy, you will probably want to say, never talk about medication. Never talk about who would be a good therapist or not, unless you want to provide that information. But there again, you need to know who are the trusted therapists, right? So you can set some guardrails about things that you want to talk. Or if someone is showing warning, like danger to others or to themselves, right? You should not engage in those conversations. You should only provide information about where to seek help with a mental health professional. So these are things that whoever is developing mental health chatbots can try to benefit. We will see later in other videos some very interesting things that happen when you compare rule-based chatbots for mental health and generative AI-based chatbots for mental health. Stay tuned. I hope you enjoy this and that you learn a little the basics on the types of chatbots that we have in the field of mental health. See you next time. Bye.